of those planes and take out equipment or take out men.
Oh yeah, I mean that would be really scary, and then you always had to worry about the flak too. Taking out the plane, which that's where we lost probably the majority of them.
Well, it was really flying combat was brutal. It was dangerous from the time they took off to the time they landed. To begin with, at its peak, there were 40 bomb groups in the 8th Air Force located in and around an area called East Anglia in England, which is about the size of Vermont. And these bases were just like 5 to 10 miles apart. And so the day of a mission, you had hundreds of bombers taken off all at the same time. And back then, there was no air traffic control. There was no radar. It was all based on visual sight. And usually the weather was crummy in England, overcast, socked in, cloudy, and they couldn't see anything above until they got above the cloud layer. So mid-air collisions weren't uncommon at all. And then they had to form up. Individual planes formed up into three-plane elements. Elements formed up into bomb squadrons. Bomb squadrons formed up into bomb groups. Bomb groups formed up into combat wings. Combat wings formed up into air divisions. And all this took an hour to 2 hours before we even headed across the English Channel to begin their mission. And then they had to deal with the elements. These planes weren't pressurized back then, so above 10,000 feet they had to go on oxygen, or they'd pass out in a couple of minutes and die. And then it was extremely cold. It was minus 40 to 60 degrees below zero in these planes. So frostbite was a huge problem. And there were many airmen that were hospitalized for lengthy periods of time with serious frostbite injuries. And one of my dad's waist gunners, he was in the hospital for a couple months because he had such bad frostbite injuries. And then, like you say, they had to deal with the enemy fighters. The Germans had radar stations along the continental coast of England, so they knew when these bombers formations were coming, and they'd send up their Air Force, the Luftwaffe, to intercept them. And when they got close to the target, they ran into anti-aircraft fire, or flak. Flak was the abbreviation for the German word for aircraft defense cannon. And they were deadly weapons. They could fire 20 shells a minute, and they were calibrated to explode at the same altitude that those bombers were flying. And these shells were filled with all different shapes and sizes of razor-sharp metal that would just burst out hundreds of feet when they exploded. And when they started the bomb run, these bombers couldn't take any evasive action, so they were just flying into this killing field of flak, never knowing that the next moment might be their last. My dad told me that even though it was so cold up there on these bomb runs, he would just be sweating profusely and be dripping wet with sweat because of the adrenaline running through his body. So it was really a harrowing experience.
Well, you know what it would be like to be, in a B-17, when you're in formation and you start seeing other B-17s drop from the sky. That would be, I have to say they were very brave, people to be able to do what they did.
Oh, yeah. If one of these flak shells made a direct hit on a bomber, it would basically disintegrate and disappear. Or if it knocked a wing off, the bomber would just drop like a stone down to earth. So yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal. And then after the bomb run, whatever bombers made it through okay, they would form up again and then head back to England. And then once again, they would encounter enemy fighters on their way back home.
Yeah, that and the flak too in various areas. That, again, and then if you couldn't keep up with the formation too, then you're sitting there by yourself. And that, again, would be really, in a situation I wouldn't want to be in.
Yeah, that was deadly because these bomber formations flew in what was called the combat box formation. It was a three-dimensional structure. You had a lead group, a high group, low group. And the protection is just flying these tight formations. That was another thing. These pilots had to stay alert at all times, or else they'd clip a wing on the plane next to them or run into the plane in front of them, and they'd go down, which happened. But they wanted to stay in these tight formations so they could, the interlocking firepower from all these 50 caliber machine guns could ward off the German fighters. So if a bomber or if a pilot kind of, lost concentration and started kind of tailing away from the formation, or if a plane was damaged or had an engine out and started falling behind the formation, they became easy targets for the German fighters.
Oh yeah, that would be not a situation I wouldn't want to be in. Now I want to touch base too. What was it like, going through his records and finding out what was it like to live in England during the war? I mean, and what the people had to go through. I know they had to go through massive air raids. The tension was high. What was it like? What did your father go through?
The British, they were, as I said, the 8th Air Force got over there in the summer of '42. So the Brits had been fighting the war for 2.5 years before we got over there, and they went through the Blitz, the Luftwaffe bombing the cities and the Battle of Britain, and so they had gone through a lot. They had, the blackouts, the curfew, and my dad said when they go into London, they get lost all the time because it'd be so pitch black they couldn't find their way around any place. That was really the English people really, went through some hard times. They had, really strict rationing, even more so than we had here in the States. So it was, they call it the friendly invasion. All these American servicemen going over to England. I think there's 3 million servicemen that were stationed in England at one time or another. So they did kind of invade the country. And, England, there was a big difference. It was a shock both for the English people, the British people, to have these Americans come over, but then it was also a shock for the American troops, the GIs, to go over there. You have to remember, back then, the U.S. was a much different place. So the majority of the people lived in rural areas. So a lot of people on farms. They didn't live in the cities like they did today. A lot of these guys had just gotten out of high school. A lot of these guys, it was very provincial. A lot of them never even left their home county. Now all of a sudden here they are halfway around the world fighting the war. First time they've been away from home and family and their parents. And all of a sudden now, they can drink, they can smoke, they can have sex. It was a whole new world. And London at the time was the most amazing city in the world. And you had people from all over the world and from these occupied countries, and from the British Empire. The British Empire was still strong back then, and so it was a real melting pot of nationalities. These guys over there, their eyes were wide open and experiencing something just so new and unique. They'd see these buildings over there. A new building to them would be like a few hundred years old.
Oh yeah.
And the British, where they were proper and reserved and didn't really know how to take these brash young U.S. servicemen. Most of these guys are in their late teens, early 20s, full of vim and vigor. Most of the British had, as far as knowing what America was like, is from the movies and all these movie stars and cowboys. It was a real shock.
Oh, I know it was. I can guarantee, though, it was a lot of marriages between, Americans and the English.
Yeah, I think there were 50,000 war brides that came over to the U.S. after the end of the war. It came over on the Queen Mary or the Queen Elizabeth, and of course, a lot of babies were born as well. I've talked to medics in the 8th Air Force, and they said they treated more cases of venereal disease than they did battle wounds.
Another thing too, just think about, you fall in love with somebody and you never know if you're going to return after each mission. And, it's not just hard on the person It's hard on both people.
Oh yeah,
Emotionally.
Yeah. Time was short. No one knew how much longer they'd have, so they could not live life to the fullest.
Oh yeah,
to a lot of degrees.
Well, what made your father decide to be a pilot? What motivated him on that? Did you ever talk to your dad about that?
Oh yeah. Initially, my dad didn't go into the Air Force as a result of the first peacetime draft in history, which was implemented by President Franklin Roosevelt in the fall of 1940. My dad went into the Army, the infantry, in April of 1941, and he was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington.
Oh, that's next to me here. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was there for a year actually, and that was in April of 41. He married my mother, Ruth Hempel, who was born and raised in Pasadena. Like me, my dad was actually born in Norfolk, Nebraska, and moved to California with his family when he was 13. They got married in July, and then that December 7th, Pearl Harbor was bombed by Japan, and the United States was at war. So my mother was, really upset. The future was very uncertain. So she went up to visit my dad over Christmas in Washington. And 9 months later, Susan Ruth was born.
I wonder why.
So at the time, my dad here, he's got a new bride, a baby on the way, and he didn't think he could support him very well on a private's pay in the Army. So he decided to volunteer for the Air Force where he could make more money, especially if he could make it through pilot training. And I go through pilot training in the book and become an officer. And so that's why he went into the Air Force, really just to make more money to be able to support his family.
That sounds like my dad's case. He was in the Army, I would say maybe late 30s, because he told me he couldn't find a job. He was an enlisted man. And pretty much the same thing, the war broke out, and he decided, he didn't want to be an enlisted man. And whatever he did, he got transferred into the Army Air Force and, first started out as a radio operator and then somehow became a bombardier. So, boy, he was telling me all these missions that he, over Africa, over Italy, all this stuff. And I think they were flying like B-25s, but it's something I would never want to go through. Yeah.
It was harrowing, all right. Another thing, mentioning the pay, the U.S. servicemen were paid much better than the British servicemen. They were paid like 5-6 times more. So when these the GIs were over in England, they had all this money to spend on the girls. So that was another thing that really was attractive to these British women, is that these American servicemen had all these money, and they had access to chocolate, to cigarettes, to nylons, which they didn't have in England. And so they welcomed these U.S. servicemen because they got treated pretty good.
Oh, yeah. And that's, too, it also really stimulated their economy, too, during the war.
Yeah. It was just the what went on in England is a fascinating subject, let alone the combat that took place during the war.
Now, did your father ever talk to you about how long did it take to go to school to become a pilot? The training. I know at one point they were turning out pilots really fast, but how did your father ever talk about that?
Yeah, that back then, there really wasn't pretty much of an Air Force. Well, when World War II started, the United States ranked 18th in the world in military strength behind Romania. The United States, before the war broke out, didn't have much of a military presence, and really nothing to speak of as far as an Air Force. They had to just train all these guys to become fighter pilots or bomber pilots. And they rushed them through fairly well. My dad started pre-flight training in Santa Ana, California,